This is Gemara Menachos, Daf Samach Dalid, and we're holding on Samach Gimel Amid Beis as we began the new parak yesterday, and we dove into the Gemara, and we're discussing particularly for now Shitas Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael in the Mishnah said that the Omer of Shavuos fame, this Omer has different quantities depending on when it is brought. If it is brought on Shabbos, it comes with from 3 saw flour. If it's brought during the week, it comes from 5 saw flour. And yesterday in the Gemara, we explained the reason has to do with more sifting is required, and a machlekes whether we want to be yarbe b'teireach or yarbe b'melacha. Today we begin 6 lines from the bottom. The first one line is harbe. Amar Rabba. Says Rabba, Rabbi Yishmael, Reb Shimon ben Yishav ben Breika, Amru Davar Echad. This sheet of Rabbi Yishmael says says Rabba is the same as Rabbi Yishmael ben Yishav ben Breika. Titania, we learned in a Braisa, Arba Seshachali Yis B'Shabbos, the 14th of Nisan, that falls out on Shabbos, and I should correct myself. I think I said of Shavuos fame. Of course, this is the Omer of Pesach fame. Apologies. The 14th falls out on Shabbos. You do the Havshata of the Karban Pesach only until the Chazeh, the breast, because that's how far you need to go to remove the parts of the Karban that are going to go on the Mizbeach. And therefore, to do any further Havshata is not necessary on Shabbos. Rabbi Chachamim Aimer now, Ad Sheyavshid Es Kulai, you do the complete Havshata. So says the Gemara, Milam Rabbi Shmuel ben Yishav ben Breika Asam. Did Rabbi Shmuel ben Yishav ben Breika not say over there? Kol Echad Efshar Lo Yitarchinan. Whenever there's a possibility, we don't want to have excessive effort on Shabbos. And therefore, what do? Therefore, you go and you minimize by only having to do the Havshata to the requisite amount. So Hachanami, says the Gemara, here too in our Mishnah, as we explained the Shita of Rabbi Yishmael, Tevshar Leitar Chinan. The Rabbi Yishmael says, since you could bring with only 3 saw, we bring with the minimum amount, and we don't do the extra tircha to get to 5 saw. So the Gemara wants to suggest that the sheet of Rabbi Yishmael in our Mishnah is the same as Rabbi Yishmael ben Yishav ben Breika in the Bryce over there. Responds the Gemara, Mimai, 2 lines from the bottom. How do you know this? Dilma, perhaps Adkan, like Amar, Rabbi Yishmael ben Yishmael Acha. Maybe Rabbi Yishmael's din is an isolated din by us. Why? There's no bizayon. There's no doing something in half. As the last Rashi points out, that when you were to take the Karban Pesach and do the Havshata on a Chazeh, it's not sightly. It's disgusting. You have an animal that's half flayed, and it's like an Nevela. So maybe Rabbi Yishmael would say in that case, no, don't do it. Aval Hasam, think of Zayin Kachim. In such a scenario in which there's Zayin, perhaps Rabbi Yishmael would say, maybe you would hold like the Rabbanan. And similarly, Inami on the top of Samach Daled Beis says the Gemara on a similar vein, maybe the Fakert is true. That what? Perhaps Adkan, like Rabbi Yishmael ben Yishav ben Breika, maybe his din was only over there by the Karban Pesach. Hasam, Ella Desiav, Ella why? Desavida Leil Tzarech Kavaya. There you did what needed to be done. And you don't have to do anything more. You didn't really do as much as you needed. And you need to do more. Maybe also like the Rabbanan, meaning maybe Rabbi Shal ben Yishav would say that no, you should bring the requisite, all five, because that's really the necessity. So says the Gemara, perhaps the two cases are not analogous. Perhaps the two cases are not the same shita. And as much as maybe it seems that they're similar at the onset, the Gemara would like to prove that they do not necessarily correlate. Continues the Gemara, Ella Amar Rabba. So comes along Rabba, and Rabba says, okay, you know what? That analogy you didn't like, I'll prove you another one. Again, continuing to show that perhaps the Shita Rav Yishmael is not an isolated din, that when you have the potential, you minimize and you only bring 3 and not 5. Well, you're going to find a precedent to this elsewhere. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Rav Yishmael, Rav Chanina, Skana Kohanim, Rav Yishmael, Rav Chanina Skana Kehanim Amru Davar Echad. Who is this? That's now we learned in the Mishnah. Rav Chanina Skana Kehanim Oimer B'Shabbos Nekatzer Kiyachid B'Magal Echad B'Kufa Echad. This is the second part of our Mishnah. Then on Shabbos, one person does the Ksira with one sickle into one basket. Ubachal, and during the week, B'Shleisha, 3 people, B'Shalish Kupais in 3 boxes, B'Shalish Magalos in 3 sickles. V'chachamim oimrim echad Shabbos v'echad chol b'shalosh kupas v'shalosh magalos. So now, what is this machlekes? This is the end of our Mishnah. What is the machlekes? Rav Chanina Skana Kehanim versus the Kehanim. Versus the Chacham, excuse me. Mi like Amar Chanina Skana Kehanim awesome. Is Rav Chanina Skana Kehanim not saying the din over there? Kivan de Evshar, Leitar Chinon. Since you could do it by one person, so we don't want to do excessive tircha on Shabbos. So to Achanami by us. Kivan de Evshar, Leitar Chinon, Rabbi Yishmael. So says the Gemara, says Rabbah, perhaps the din of our Mishnah is the same as the din over there. Responds the Gemara, Nacham Omimai. How do you know it's the same machlok? It's till Ma'ad. Can look come Rabbi Yishmael. Maybe Rabbi Yishmael only says it's din by us. The din that what? That when possible you bring 3 Yisar and not 5. Maybe Rabbi Yishmael only says it's din. Hacha ella deleka persume milsa. No one knows about it by us. There's no pearsome to what's going on. There's no extra anything, meaning, whereas Aval Hasam, look at the contrast and it'll be clear. Diker Persume Milso, when it comes to the reaping, when it comes to the preparations, to have 3 people doing it and not one, creates a higher level of pearsome, which perhaps is necessary. So maybe I'll take the Rabbanan. And similarly, also maybe he only says then over there, Di Bechad. There was only one person, Ibishleisha, Sar Gavaya, Misavid Kil Chasa. Maybe you'll be masking that the Sar Gavaya is not done properly if, excuse me, the opposite. Di Bechad, one second, I skipped the line. Look over Hasam, that one person should do it. Why? Because however you do it, you're getting the requisite amount. So who cares if it's one person or 3? But over here in our Mishnah, whether it's 3 sa or not, maybe that's not called kilchasa to bring 3 and not 5. So Sarah Gavaya, it is a Sarah Gavaya Makraban and Svirle. So Nachamal says the Gemara, the 2 machlekesim are not necessarily dependent one upon the next. So Elam Ravashi comes on Ravashi with a third Marmakayim, a third comparison to whom Rabbi Yishmael in our Mishnah could hold like. Elam Ravashi, Rabbi Yishmael, the Rabbi Yaisi, Amru Davar Echad. Maybe Rabbi Yishmael is the same thing as Rabbi Yaisi, the Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah. Bein Shenira Ba'alil, Bein Shalaynira Ba'alil, Mechalin Alav Es HaShabbos. We're discussing Kiddush HaChodesh, a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, that we as well had a Gemara in Shabbos. And we're trying to figure out at what level are we Mechalel Shabbat in order to create Rosh Chodesh. On what level Do we allow a person to travel to Bezdin to report that he saw the new moon in order to be Mekadesh l'Chaydesh? So says the Mishnah over there, Ben Shanir Ba'alil, Ben Shanir whether we're seeing visibly or not, Mechalanas Shabbos, says the Tanakama. Rabbi Yosi Omer, in the Balil, if you saw clearly, Ein Mechalan Alav, it says Shabbos. Then you're not Mechalal Shabbos if it's as clear as day. Why? Because the Pashta says that if you saw clearly wherever you are, the Pashta says wherever Bezdin is, they also saw clearly. So what are you going traveling to Beis HaMikdash? L'chayra, it's going to happen without you. So what is the siba? What is at the crux of what Rabbi Yosi is saying? Since it's possible, maybe someone else saw it, maybe Bezdin saw it. So we don't allow you to travel on Shabbos. Hachanami by us as well. Kivan de'afshir. Since it's possible, lo yitar chinan. So says the Gemara, maybe Rabbi Yosi is like Rabbi Yishmael. Though Rabbi Yishmael says to bring 3 and not 5, it's like Rabbi Yosi over there that says that if it's near a Baalil, if you see the new moon clearly, don't go to Bezdin, because l'chayra, Bezdin or someone else saw it that would not need to travel on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Mimai Nachamal, Dilmad Kan Likamer Rabbi Yishmael. On the fourth white line, maybe Rabbi Yishmael only says it's in by us. Elam. There's no potential issue that could come out in the future if you go and you bring 3 and not the full 5 perfect saw. Aval Hasam, but by Kiddush HaChodesh is a fear. You're going to cause a mechshal. People think you didn't go this month, they're not going to go next month. Ema K'Rabbanan, and surely maybe like the Rabbanan. Inami, I can't come Rav Yosi Asam on the Fakert. Maybe Rav Yosi only said his din over there. There's no real need. There's no reason for you to take a Shabbos. There is in the Shabbos. Maybe he holds like the Rabbanan. So 3 attempts and proves the Gemara that not necessarily are the 2 cases dependent one upon the other. Continues the Gemara, 10 lines down. The first one line is Itmar. So we began trying to find a predecessor, a first cousin, another Marmakayim to Shitas Rabbi Yishmael. 3 attempts were tried and each one was deflected. Now says the Gemara, let's try to find another case that is similar. Itmar, Shachat Shnei Chatois, Shel Tzibor. If someone shechted 2 chatois of the Sibor, Veinai Tzarech Alachas, he only needs 1 carbon. Amar Rabba, says Rabba, V'itema Revami, Chayiv al Sheniyo, Patal Yishayna. The second one that he shechted was not necessary, so he was chayiv. The first one he's pater. V'afilu nischaber loy b'sheniya. And as much as he's chayiv for it, let's say he brought the second carbon, so he got the kapara through that carbon, he's still chayiv for it. V'afilu nimzes rishayna kechusha. And even if after shechting the first one, it's found to be too lean, and that's why you shechted the second one, still a maisa, it was not allowed to be shechted the second one, so you're chayiv. So says the Gemara, a din of Rabba. Says the Gemara, really? Umiyam Rabba Haki, does Rabba really see this? V'amar Rabba, but Rabba says, Ayilafan of Sheikha Tois, Achad Shemeina v'achad kechusha, 1 fat and 1 lean. Shachad Shemeina v'achad shachad kechusha chayiv. If you first shech the fat one and then the lean one, you're chayiv. But kechusha v'achagach shemeina, what's the din? Pater. V'lo'id, says Rabbi. Not only that, el shaymer lo'i havi shemeina lechatchila v'shachet. Bring the shemeina lechatchila and shecht it. So Rabbi seems to be of the opinion that you're able to bring a shemeina over a chusha. Says the Gemara, 2 terutzim. Iba Yisema, either I'm going to tell you, Sami Kechusha Mekamaisa, remove the din of Kechusha from the first taste. So it wasn't about Kechusha, we're just talking about if you shechted the second carbon for no reason. Iba Yisema. Second teretz, Ayi Rav Ami Amra. Says the Gemara, the first one was Rav Ami, and it wasn't Rabba. Okay, so now we deflected whether we have a isolated stira in Rabba. But now, Amrli Rav Rav Ashi, Nimseis Richayne Kechusha, Bimnei Me'ayim. Ma, what happens if the first animal you find to be Kechusha after the second animal was shechted? Are you now not chayiv if the first one you didn't know about that it was shmei chusha? You didn't do it for that reason. Rabbi said if you knew it and you did, then it's fine. What if you didn't know and you did? Basar machshava azlinon vegavra liyisur kamachavin. A yisaidistic and fundamental shayla. When you did that second shchita, what did you think? You thought there was no reason for it because you thought you already shechted the first one. So therefore, your machshava was for Isser. Oidoma basar ma'isa aslinan. Or lemaisa, you didn't do an Isser because lemaisa, the first one was kechusha. Amar lei lav hainu dirabba virava. Says Rav Ashi, is this not the din of Rabba and Rava? Ditmar. We learn Shamash Edavatinok Bayam. You hear Rahman al-Itzlan, a child is drowning. So what do? Upasha mitzudalalis dagim. You spread out your net to catch fish. Vehela dagim. And you caught fish. Chayiv, you're chayiv. But vehela is dagim. Let's say you went to go fishing, but vehela dagim vetinoik. And lemaisa, you saved the child's life. Rav Amar chayiv v'Rabba Amar pater. So says the Gemara, is this not the same machlokes? Vad kan Rabba loika pater? Why did Rabba say you're pater? Elikim deshama. Because the case was that you lemaisa heard that there was a drowning child. So we say nami tinuk. And as much as it seemed like you were being abyssal callous, and you went and you said, I'm going fishing right now. But l'chayra, if you know that there's a child over here, that's your das as well. But if you didn't know at all about it, l'chayra would be our case. So says the Gemara, is this not a machlekes Rabba and Rava? Igadi Amri, a second explanation. Amrle hainu pluktayo derava Rava. This is mamish machlekes itmar. Shamish tavatinik bayam uvarsh besul alos lagin vela dagin chayev alos dagin vela tinoik v'dagin Rava Rabbat Rava chayev. Rava Rabbat zol basar ma'isa. Rava chayev zol basar machshavasa. And this is going to be the predecessor to our case. Do we go basar your machshava? He had ill intentions, or do we say lamaisa? You did the appropriate act. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. Another famous Gemara. We have a chayla that we say he needs a dried fig on Shabbos. A chayla misuk on someone dying. Viratzu, and people run. Asara, 10 of them in a yadam. Asara gregoris vazachas. They bring him 10 gregoris. Turin, their pater. Afilu b'zuach arzu, and this is mamish, one of the biggest saydais of Hatzalas Nefashis. Even if they come one after another, afilu kadam ve'evri b'rit shaina, even if lamaisa, he got healed by the first one, still, he's going to be, the latter ones are going to be pater. Why? Because his machshava was to save. This is, of course, the reason on a Hatzalah call, if a Hatzalah member goes thinking it's necessary and he finds out that it's not, he is still pater. He didn't do anything wrong. Rava and Grada, when it comes to Salstafashais, we say that it was mamish, it's considered a maisa of a chaybahem, because that's what he thought he was doing. Rava, fragt Rava, chel shem duel shtei gragrais, v'yesh shtei gragrais, b'shtei yoksin, and 2 figs on 2 stems, or v'shaylish boketzechos, or you have 3 figs but on 1 stem, so it's either 1 maisa to get more or 2 maisas to get what is needed. Hey, minayo maisinan. Do we say shtei masninan? The chazilu. 2 are chazis. You're allowed to do 2 separate maisas ketziris. You're allowed to do 2 separate actions of cutting. That's what the chayla needs. Haidilma shalish maisinan. No, bring 3 to come a to ketzira. Bring 3. Why? Because you are minimizing the mice of the Malacha Shabbos. Says the Gemara Pshita. Shalosh Maisinan. Why? As we turn over to Samachdal Mebeis, Arkan Lakomer Vishmal Hasam Ella, Techimamayit Bachila, Kamamayit Ksira. Aval Hacha, Techimamayit Bachila, Kamavsha Ksira, Vadai Shalosh Maisinan. Over here says the Gemara, Vada and Avada. What do you bring? You do 1 Maisa Ksira. It's going to have a result of something more. That is not the problem, because that is Lamaisa. The action done is what the Chayla needs. And we pick it up with the Mishnah. The Mishnah 4 lines down. Samach Dalet Amebeis. Mitzvah Sa'omer, continuing the Omer, again of Pesach fame. Mitzvah Sa'omer. Lavi min akaroi. The mitzvah is to bring barley from the closest place to Yerushalayim. Lo yibiker akar of the Yerushalayim. Maybe if that is not possible, then why it's not ripe, etc. Then what? Then you bring mikol makom. Maisa was a story. Sheba Omer. Sorry. Maisa, there was a story. Sheba Omer Megagois Srifim. There's a story that the barley came from a place called Gagois Srifim, Shtei Alechem, Mi Bikas Ein Soicher. Says the Gemara, my time. What is the reason for this first din that you should bring the barley from the closest place to Yerushalayim? Ibaisem Misham Karamel, Ibaisem Misham De'ein Ma'avirin Alamitzvos. 2 different reasons. Either it's because of Carmel, says the pasuk, you want to have the most gishmaka, plum kernels, and therefore it should be from nearby. Why? So that it's the freshest, it doesn't have excessive travel time. Or the reason you want to bring it from the closest place is because in Mavir and Alamitzvos. By going further, you're passing by a mitzvah. The Mishnah continued and said, Maisa story, Shaba Omer, Migagoy Srifim. Tanarabanan says the Gemara, the Chashonayim were taking over. Vayohorkinis bivachotz. Horkinis is outside. This turbulence bivivnim, and his turbulence was inside. Every day they would lord dinarim over the wall in a basket. And they'd raise up a land for them for the carbon tamid. There was an old man inside who knew Chachmas Yivanis. He communicated to them in Greek. Amr Lahem calls man. He told them, by the way, you're performing a siege, and you're giving them the carbonis. Well, guess what? The carbon is sustaining them. As long as they have the carbon, you're never going to win. So Lamachar, the next day, so the Yidin, Nachama lowered the money in a basket. And what did the Goyim give them? Chazir. They sent up a chazir, a pig. When the animal on its way up reached half the wall, the animal itself, not Siparnav B'chaima, it stuck its hooves into the wall. V'nizdazeya Eretz Yisrael Arba Meyois Parsa. Al Arba Meyois Parsa. Eretz Yisrael shook for 400 by 400 Parsa east. Ba'isa Sham, at that moment they said, Arur Shegadol Chazir, cursed is the one that raises a pig. And at that time they taught us, and that's what we learned in our Mishnah, that there was a time that had to come from such a far away place. Came time to bring the Omer, came Pesach, and they didn't know where they're going to get the barley. Achrazu, they announced, does anyone know we get barley? Osau charsha. a certain mute man came. He put one hand on a roof, one hand on a hut. Amr leho Mordechai. So Mordechai said to those around him, "This is the Heliga Mordechai Atzadik. Mika dochta deshema gagoy serif deshama." Gaga Srifim. Based on what this guy said, that one hand's on a gag and one hand's on a Srifa, says Mordechai, hey, he's telling us something. Is there a place called Gaga Srifim or Srifim Gagois? Baltku, they checked, Vishkachua, and they found the Omer in such a place. They didn't know where to get the ingredients for it. Achrazu, they announced, Asa Gavra Charsha. A certain guy came, an Achamal, who is a mute. But one hand on his eye and one hand on the door. Amar lehu Mordechai said, is there a place perhaps called In Seicher or Seicher Ayin? They went searched and they found this place. Incredible. I guess we'll call it the Chachma, the Torah, the genius of Mordechai HaTzadik, being able to understand what these mitzvahs were meaning, and that's why we have to bring both of the Karbanayim and the Shtei Lechem that year. Stop over here. We'll pick it up from Shalosh Nashim, V'siyata Dishmaya.